So, welcome to this podcast, which is very informal. It's very amateur based. I want it to be that way so that I can just talk to you informally. It's not in a studio. I do have a home studio which I could go to and just talk to you, but I'm just going to grab my phone out when I get my thoughts together and I've got the time, because time is going to be very constricted and important to me going forward. And this is very late in the well, it's very early in the morning, and I've just decided, well, I'll crack on and start doing this. And so this podcast series is essentially about me writing a novel, and the idea is for you to follow me and see where I get, and follow my glorious failures and any joys and successes I get along the way, and any advice I can impart or any pitfalls I can help writers avoid. So I don't know in what way you would perceive me, possibly as an aspiring novelist, possibly as a wannabe writer. You might think, oh God, this guy is a joker, he's a chancer. You might think of me as a mentor or someone who's holding your hand and someone who's really living it, someone who's got the balls to just put it on tape like you're listening to now and say, well, here we go. And that's one of the reasons why I am recording my voice, talking to you, is because I want to hold the whole process accountable. So a quick bit of information. Firstly, the book is called, I already know the title, it's going to be called My Love versus Yours. So that will be the working title, and that's My Love versus, as in verses in a song or a poem, with a comma, and yours. And yes, there is a slight dodgy pun in there, and all puns are intended. My name is Johnny Wills, and I will be writing about a character called Jackson Rocco, who also happens to be a pseudonym of mine, in a non-fiction book that I have written, and it's online, called The Book of Kinky Sex Games. He is a very useful character I've used to get out there in the kink and fetish scene. I don't necessarily think this book is going to be that kinky or naughty or out there. It's just going to be about the process of Jackson Rocco in his run up to that book, way before he wrote that book. So I'm using that character or that side of myself, hopefully in an interesting sort of meta way that will pull out a side of me that needs to be revealed. I have another character called Doctor, in brackets, Velma, H-U, who is a Chinese lady who is a therapeutic counselor. She happened to be a student that stayed in Brighton and became very interested in clinical situations and the mind and psychology and things. And therapy and counselling is very big in Brighton, in different forms and different streams. And I'm using my knowledge of people that are involved in that to talk about, or to use this as the background for this character. The third main character in the book will be called Helena Fuchs, Fuchs. And yes, I have got these characters kind of fully formed in my head. And so I have a head start. I also have a head start on the structure. And I've had this book in my head for about 5 years. But why have I started now, and why have I not started before? And what processes am I going to embark upon to get this thing done? So let's talk about that now. So in order to talk about it, I will need to dip in and out of what the story of the novel is going to be, and also talk to you a bit about my life, maybe, to show you how I'm using my time, and some of the people who are helping me with a bit of support, maybe some mentorship and some feedback, etc. And I think that's very useful. And you might be thinking, well, how are you going to get this published? And I think I'm saying to you right now, as the listener to all this, well, I'm going to get the thing written first, and I'm using this podcast to help me get through a few chapters and see where we go with it. Now, the traditional thing to do is to send your first 3 chapters or your first 30 pages to find yourself an agent. And then what the agent will do is they will give you some feedback about how they think you should proceed. And then you think how they want it or how publishers are doing. I'm going to be a little bit foolhardy from the outset. I'm going to roll the dice a little bit, and I'm going to tell you that because I have the story in my head about the whole thing, I want to write that story. So that's very important to me. The upside of that is that it's not going to be a terribly long novel. So it's probably going to come in at between 30,000 to 70,000 words. And so I'm thinking hopefully it will be, if it's a 200-page book, then I'll be very happy. I know that sounds short, but I like the idea of a sort of novella, short novel that's succinct to the point, especially with this subject matter that I'm dealing with. I'd like people to see the book and think, I could read that, I can get through that. And there are some easy things to read in it that, is very engaging. I'm going to make the style engaging and easy and fluid, but there's going to be some complicated ideas in there, I think. So it's a question of trying to get those things across, and in a way that is open enough for readers to make up their own minds about what's happening. So that's enough about that. So what about the structure? Well, the structure talks about how we're going to write the book, and also how we're going to read the book. So I've been talking to a writer friend of mine, and they are struggling with the idea of writing a book. Like most writers, nearly all the writers I know, they struggle with ideas. And then the next thing they struggle with is getting on with it and writing and doing the work. And it's not necessarily about how hard it is to do, or the workload, or being a writer. It's more to do with a little bit of fear, a bit of doubt, a bit of procrastination, a bit of the unknown, especially if it's their first time out. And I can fully understand that because I've done that process when I've written poems. I've written a couple of books of poems. When I've written songs, I've written over 1,000 songs. I've written a screenplay, and that took 4 rewrites. I've written half of another screenplay, which has been abandoned. I'm happy that's been abandoned because I'd love to go back to that. I've got a half-written play, so I know what it's like to not finish a play, but I'm going to come back to that. And a few short stories here and there. I've had lots of articles printed in magazines and newspapers, and so I'm confident that I can finish a piece. And also because I have experience editing, I think I can edit myself and proof it to a point where I can hand it to someone else to give it a good proofreading to make it publishable. Now, what about structure? Well, when I was talking to my writer friend, who is yet to write his first book, and I'm in the same boat. So my thing is to try and spur him on to write his book while I write mine. And also to help me write the book is a podcast. So that's a form of structure in the sense that it's putting the pressure on me to actually sit down and write the thing. So here I am waffling away, and you're thinking, well, where is this book? And how far has he got with it? And I'll come to that in a minute. But I've given you a title, and I've given you some characters, and I've told you that I've been thinking about this book for a long time. So I'm confident enough that the story is going to be strong. What needs to happen now is that I need to implement the writing from an outline that I've written down, some chapters. And the way I've done that is by organising a story that I've written in a short story form into noticeable chapters, and say to myself, well, I want the story to go like this in the long form version, so that when I cut this up into these chapters, I'm going to expand upon it and give you all the details and the build up, and then possibly some kind of cliffhanger type idea. Now, bear with me on this, because it's important that I get that right, because it's not about necessarily writing a book of escapism and thriller, because that's not my genre, and I'll tell you my genre in a second. But it's very important that the structure is in place so that tomorrow when I wake up, I can go get my laptop, pull out the chapter I'm doing, and get from A to B. So that's the important thing. It's a roadmap of my story. That sounds really obvious until you actually do it. But when you've got it in front of you, it's very exciting, because you think, well, here we go. I've got this. So coming back to my writer friend who hasn't started his book, what I can say is that he knows all about himself as someone who's not writing. He knows all his pitfalls, and he knows all his failings. So I said to him, that's a head start. That's very important that you write that down, what those are, and work on those, because those are essentially mental roadblocks, but they're not writing. So you might as well just get on with writing, and don't be afraid to write any old rubbish that goes down. But in these stages, you're not really writing either the great American novel, he's American, so I said that to him, or you're not writing the great book like Tolstoy and trying to impress anyone in the literary world. You're just trying to get on and get some stuff written down. So an outline is very important. What to do in the outline? Well, make sure you've got a cracking ending, and maybe start from the ending. Now, how to do that? You think, well, how do I come up with an ending? How do I come up with a story? Well, that's not my problem. I'm not here to spoon feed you. I'm sure you have stories you've written that you could expand. I'm sure you do know of true stories somewhere that you could manipulate into a novel.